Hello, and welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs, a podcast for the lit curious reader, because why not read a little of everything? I'm Joey Kelly,
And I'm Jennifer Smith.
and today we're going to have an affair with Allie Smith and her novel Autumn. The UK version looks different, but I like this one better. So we have not read this author before, but before we even get into that, I'm going to surprise you. Because we read a book called Autumn, and obviously it's the autumn season right now. Jennifer, do you have something that you always make when it's the autumn time? What are your traditions?
I do have some traditions, Joey. So, for many, many years, I'm going to say almost 20, I've attended a Fall Institute event with other great bookies who get together and read on a topic. I just did that the first weekend in November. So, I'm feeling very grateful for the community that we've built here in the Northeast. I'm very excited about that. And it's not Thanksgiving yet, but it's on the cusp. I always make this really fun cranberry walnut salad that my parents then took that tradition from me hosting and they started doing it themselves. So it was a reverse family tradition. And now that they're gone, I'm planning to do that with my partner and his family. And I'm really excited about that. How about you, Joey? What are some of your fall traditions?
I don't really have any traditions, I guess. Usually, me and my sister and my brother-in-law will watch the Great British Bake Off. It's not on anymore. It just finished a few weeks ago. So that is always fun. Although I didn't do it this season, I try to make something that they're going to bake in the episode. We don't always know ahead of time what the episode theme is going to be. So I do that. Other than that, just making delicious, cozy meals and bread and lots of desserts. So you could be fat and happy, you know?
Yeah, I absolutely love that theme, Joey. Fat and happy. I'm on board for the fall.
Yeah. There's this little meme, this lady that the news person is interviewing her, and they're like, "Oh, what are you going to do for today?" She's like, "We're just going to go home and make some soup and eat bread and be fat." I don't remember what it is, but it's so funny. Anyway, now that we know our own autumnal traditions, or what we like to do at least, do you want to tell us a little bit about Allie Smith?
I do.
Obviously, she's a cousin of yours.
She should be.
There's definitely not that many Smiths in the world.
No, there's never enough Smiths. So, Joey, Ali Smith is a Scottish author, playwright, academic, and journalist born on August 24th, 1962, in Inverness, Scotland, so a decade ahead of me. She grew up in a working class family and attended St. Joseph's R.C. Primary School and Inverness High School, so deeply rooted in her Scottish culture. Smith studied a joint degree in English language and literature from the University of Aberdeen from 1980 to 1985, where she gained a top first in senior honors English in 1984. So she's killing the academic career right there. She then studied for a PhD in American and Irish modernism at Newham College in Cambridge, but she did not complete it. She moved to Edinburgh in 1990 and worked as a lecturer at the University of Strathclyde before returning to Cambridge to focus on her writing. Her first book, Free Love and Other Stories, was published in 1995 and won the Saltire First Book of the Year Award and the Scottish Arts Council Book Award. So right out of the gate, she's winning some awards, Joey. Smith has published several novels and short story collections, including The Accidental, Hotel World, and a novel that I have read, How to Be Both. She also published The Seasonal Quartet, which is one of the selections that we will be discussing today. She has been shortlisted for the Booker Prize 4 times. 4 times, Joey.
Oof, she's been robbed.
That's a lot. 4 times. And she has won several other awards, including the Goldsmith Prize, the Orwell Prize, Costa Best Novel Award, and the Women's Prize. She currently resides in Cambridge in the UK.
Fancy that. That's a lot to get nominated for the Booker and never win it. That's disappointing for her.
She hasn't won it yet. She is a very prolific writer, and I have high hopes that we will see more from her very soon.
Yeah, I can't imagine she won't win eventually. Okay, so as we said, we read this book, Autumn. I'm just going to read from the back of the cover because I think it's kind of hard to summarize in any other way. Autumn, season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. Two old friends, Daniel, a centenarian, and Elizabeth, born in 1984, look to both the future and the past as the United Kingdom stands divided by historic once-in-a-generation summer. Love is won, love is lost. Hope is hand in hand with hopelessness. The seasons roll round as ever. A luminous meditation on the meaning of richness and harvest and worth. Autumn is the first installment of Ali Smith's seasonal quartet, and it casts an eye over our own time. Who are we? What are we made of? Shakespearean joie de spirit, Keatsian melancholy, the sheer bright energy of 60s pop art. Autumn is wide ranging in time, scale, and light footed through histories.
Okay, just stop right there, Joey. I just have to say this. I just have to go on record right now. I know that was on the back of her book. I do not believe that she wrote a single sentence in that blurb because her writing is so evocative, so beautiful. It's just so much that was not captured in the back of the book blurb.
Yeah. That doesn't really tell you that much about the story, except for Daniel and Elizabeth are going to be our main characters. But I also don't think you need more information than that just to be intrigued in the story. I think you should just let it unfold and just go with the flow and just be like, okay, I know it's about a person that's at least 100 and then someone that's much younger than him, and then find out what's going to happen. But as you said, you have already read something by Ali Smith, which I didn't know until you said that. So you have at least have some type of history with this author. Do you remember anything about that book?
I don't remember a lot. I remember reading it with a group of people. I want to say it was in 2016, somewhere in that area. I believe we read it as a result of her being nominated for the Booker Prize, is my recollection. She is just such a beautiful writer. And I remember thinking the novel, How to Be Both, was also this interweaving about art and history. One thing that I just reread about that novel is that there are two ways to read it. You can read the first person story first, or you can read the second person story first. And the novel was written in such a way that the author said, you pick whose story you want to hear first because they echo each other in a very interesting way. So the playfulness that she had about time, connection, the ability for art to transcend language in some ways, to bring things to people's lives that they didn't even know they were missing. I was like, I think I see you, Ali Smith. I think I understand part of your worldview that you put through in your book. So when I read Autumn, it felt like a blanket. It was just so warm and beautiful, and there was so much in it, Joey. So as a first time experiencing of this author, what was that experience like for you?
I've never read this author before, but I have heard of her, and I've especially heard of the seasonal quartet. I've only ever heard good things about it, so I just randomly at a bookstore, and I was like, oh, wait, I remember seeing that somewhere, so I picked it up. It doesn't seem that long. It's probably not a huge time commitment. I'll just read it. And then I suggested that we should read this. I don't even remember why I suggested it, because I bought it, and I decided I needed to get my money's worth, I guess. And I'm so glad that I did suggest it, and that I just randomly bought it, because what a journey. I feel like I was struggling to figure out what are my overall impressions of this novel, because it is so complex, it's so nuanced, and it's so subtle at the same exact time. It's just like a quiet novel, not a lot of stuff happens. It's just so rich in language and theme. I have read it twice now, cover to cover, within a week. And I think you read it too, twice, right? And I was not bored at all the second time. I was so excited to see all the things that I knew was going to happen, to revisit the conversations that Daniel and Elizabeth have, and Elizabeth has with other characters, and Daniel with other characters, and just to experience the whole story with the understanding what's going to happen and who everybody is already. Reading it a second time made it such a richer experience. And I will say that the first time I read it, I rated this on my story graph at a 4.75, because the Pauline Body chapter, where we get what she thinks would be her perspective, I was like, I don't know. This kind of lost me. And then the second time I read it, I was like, of course, this has to be in here. We have to get this perspective. She has to tell us this story. This is part of where the story has been leading up to. And so I take it back. It's a 5-star. Okay. As I was reading this book, I kept imagining, obviously, this is not how stories are written, but the author literally knitting this story together, because everything is connected. And we just read Lullaby by Leslie Marmon Silko, and that felt very interconnected. And this feels like everything was so purposeful. Every word, every phrase, every page, you have to read everything and pay attention, because it's all necessary to the overall story. So full marks.
I agree with you on that, Joey. I listened to it 3 times and read it once with my eyes, so I am kind of ODing on this particular novel, and every time I listen to it, it gets even better, and as you said, it does feel like everything is tied together, but when you're experiencing it for the first time, it doesn't feel contrived. It doesn't feel like, "Oh, well, I better pay attention to that because she's probably trying to get us to go somewhere." Love the audiobook of Madeline Miller's Circe. I could listen to that 100 times. I probably have. This is now in the rotation. The audiobook is so good. The characters are so lovely. And as soon as they hit the last word and they read that last scene in the book, I'm like, yeah, we're going right back to the beginning because I am not ready to end this relationship with you yet. I need to go back and revisit it. And I appreciate that you talked about the historical fiction aspect of this, because one of the things that I think was amazing for me, I had never heard of Pauline Bodie. I didn't know anything about her. And I was like, wait, did you make this up? Because if you did, this is a super compelling story. So I actually went down the rabbit hole. So one reason why it took me so long to physically read this book, Joey, is that I'm just going to take a little pause. I'm going to look up probably 20 articles for reference, photographs, her biography, how she has been lost and found by generations of people. Thank you, Ali Smith, for cementing us in this really beautiful real life world. These are real people. There were real relationships. And then I was like, wait a minute. I think they're talking about a photographer who showed up in the Netflix series The Crown about some hanky panky stuff that was going on. Her made up world is not made up. It is so rooted in the actual facts. What is fictional about it is the conversations and the feelings and the other aspects. But it's like right in my wheelhouse. What do I love? I love all of the things that are interconnected, and I love historical fiction. It was so refreshing to me and such a shot in the arm to learn something more about this. So looking at those images, we're hearing Daniel tell Elizabeth, close your eyes, and I'm going to tell you a story that will paint a picture in your head. Okay, ready, set, go. I got to see if these pictures are real. And man, she nailed it. So, Joey, I will pass it back over to you, but there was not a single criticism I had about this story. There was nothing I would have changed. Zero changes, zero notes.
Yeah, I totally agree. Especially after my second read, I was like, no, 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 Joey, take everything back you were thinking because it was 100% necessary. That is a perfect thing that needs to be in this story. We have to get this fictionalized idea of Pauline Bodie, how her life might have been, or what she might have said in these conversations. One of the things that you were touching on is Daniel's love of art, arty art. Okay. If you know, you know, you have to read the book to get the reference now. Now you can be in our friend group and get our inside jokes. So that is something, first of all, that I love in novels when authors can do it correctly, and Ali Smith absolutely does it correctly, is when art becomes a part of the story and it's described and it inspires you and me, because I definitely looked up these pieces of art to be like, what is it that she's explaining? Because now I have a vision of what this is supposed to look like. And it was fun to compare what I had imagined from the description. She does a good job of describing the art correctly, but we're reading it, so we can imagine it however we want, really. So it was fun to do that. Something that I really loved was Daniel's mentorship of Elizabeth and how that really stokes her creativity and her love of art. We eventually find out that Daniel and Pauline are connected. They knew each other in real life, but he never really admits to that. She's like, there's no way you could have known about these lost pieces if you didn't know her yourself. The reason I wanted to talk about that is because there is a part of the story where he really starts to initiate that creativity or sparks her creativity. And that's when he plays this game that he seems to make up in the moment called Bagatelle, where you take a already predetermined story and they use the folk tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And he says, like, now you can you trifle with it and not that kind of trifle. Again, a joke now. So she gets to experience rewriting this story and come up with motivations for Goldilocks, and is able to use her imagination in a safe environment because she's with this person that's going to encourage that, in a very nurturing environment where he's sort of saying, and then what's going to happen? And even though she doesn't end up being a writer, she's a professor of art history, this experience is a pivotal moment for Elizabeth in the story that I really loved. I loved all their interactions, especially when Elizabeth is a child around Daniel, because I think it's so adorable. You can see how much he actually really loves her. And then there's the connection with his sister. Anyway, let me stop there because It would just be me for like 5 hours going around and talking about everything I love.
Same. Exactly the same, Joey. I'm like, okay, my turn to gush about how much I love it. And I do want to just build on what you said about that pivotal moment where he's like, I'm going to introduce you to a game. And she's like, well, wait, you're just making things up. That's not how the story goes. They sort of get into this debate. And she's like, you can't just rewrite a classic story. You don't do that. And he was like, who says? What are the rules? Who decides on that? And so that feeding of her creativity, Joey, those seeds were planted in their very first interaction where she wants to talk to him and her mom's like, I can't be bothered. Don't talk to the creepy guy next door. Just make it up. And so she makes this fictionalized book report for her school that says this is about what I would ask my neighbor, but I can't ask my neighbor because my mom won't let me. And the mom was so charmed with what the daughter wrote, she told Daniel, hey, I'm not being forward here, but I wanted to share with you what my daughter wrote. So her mom is having this moment of pride and she's like, it didn't put me in the best light as her mom, but I want to share this with you. And then Elizabeth is like, oh my gosh, I am horrified. My mom is so dumb. I can't believe she shared this with a neighbor. So she tries to avoid him. And when he says, are you Elizabeth? She's like, no, I am not. He immediately went into that fantasy with her. And it's like, if you want to bob and weave, I will bob and weave with you. And he did such a great thing of dealing with a child because at this point, she's 10 or something, and he is probably 70-ish or older. Instead of being like, hey, I'm old, you have to listen to me. He's like, I actually wanted to talk to you about your last name. Did you know what means of the world? And what does Elizabeth mean? We get the story about why he's called Daniel Gluck. The author did such a beautiful job with the naming and why that stuck with me. If I ever fall into a pit of lions, I'm going to come up on top because that's why I'm called Daniel. It was so playful, fun, and wonderful. And Joey, I know we had agreed, like, okay, let's pick 2 things we're going to talk about in this book. That's never going to happen. I can't get to 2.
I just said I would do that. I didn't say you had
That's
to
going to
do
be
that.
difficult. So I was like, okay, try really hard, focus really hard. If you wanted to tell somebody what this book was about, what is it about? A historical fiction that plants us into a very clear time and space in UK British history, where they're going through Brexit, the vote, the whole thing, this political upheaval. That's part of it. And the other part is what it means to live the life of a curious person, how to inspire yourself and others to be a very astute observer of the world. And he helps her refine her noticing skills, the art of noticing. She picks out little details and pulls stories together. It's just her natural creativity and incredible brilliance, which her mother kind of didn't get, at least as it was portrayed through the viewpoint of Elizabeth. She's like, my mom's kind of flighty. She's not very smart. She's super superficial. She's just doing her single mom stuff. She's not for me. We see that transformation as the daughter ages. She's like, my mom actually knows some things. She's actually really smart. And I love that so much as a person who also had that transformation in my own life about my parents. I'm like, they can't possibly know anything. And I'm like, oh God, they actually know a lot of really interesting things. And the last thing I'll say about that is that Daniel Gluck, in his attention to detail, his playfulness, his being unconventional and allowing people to be whoever they are, reminded me a lot of my dad. So my dad was a great storyteller. He could take any little grain of a story and weave it into something different. And I was like, oh, I miss you so much, Dad. So this was a bit of an emotional read for me, just from the reminder of what a special relationship an older person can have with a kid and how that really did change her entire life.
Yeah, in the best way possible. There's just so many things I want to talk about. As you're talking, like, oh my God, this and this and this and this and this. We could just read every page and be like, and here's how I feel about that. But the first thing that we hear from Wendy, the first time she speaks on page, she says, that old queen about Daniel, because she's convinced that he is gay. I do not think he's gay. I think he's asexual. But anyway,
Joey, I have to challenge you directly with what the author told us Daniel was through the mouth of the child. She said, Mom, he's not a homosexual. He's European. And I loved that so much. I loved that every time I heard her say that. I was like, indeed, he is a cosmopolitan person. He is not picking a team. Thank you very much.
I'm convinced he's asexual. Not that it matters to the story. I think that's part of the ambiguity, is that it never really mattered what his sexual identity was because he was still the same person. It was not a trait of his that would determine anything else in his personality. He was still going to be the kind and wonderful Daniel Gluck that I wish was my neighbor because he would be so nice.
But back to your point, it does not put the mom, Wendy, in the best light. If the first words you hear out of her mouth describing her neighbor is that old queen, that set me in a little bit of a mindset of like, really, lady? That's what you're modeling for your kid? And then all of that gets blossomed, Joey, because I'm going to have to do a spoiler. Near the end of the story, the mom, shocker, reunites with a childhood crush she had on a television show who she never met. They meet in real life and they are instantaneously simpatico. They are having inside jokes, they're enjoying each other, and her daughter walks in and her mom and her new friend, Zoe, are kissing. And she's like, okay, mom, me? I'm cool. I'm not calling names. I'm not against this. I'm fine. And so I just really appreciated that the author herself inserted that flexibility and growth and all of that in the story.
Yeah, I think there is some exploration of sexual identity, especially because obviously you said Wendy and Zoe. Whether they're dating, they're hooking up, I don't know. They seem like they're dating. And she finds love so late in life. I'm like, oh, it's so beautiful. Okay. The reason why I think Daniel is asexual is because he says something that stuck with me. I'm not asexual, that's what I'm getting at. Because I think it perfectly identifies how I feel about reading. Just wait for it. It's going to come all together. This book really reminded me of anything by Clarice Lispector, really, because I think Clarice Lispector had such a unique gift to identify things that are universally human but were things that I could not articulate or I didn't realize I couldn't articulate. And so I feel the same about this line. So when he's reunited with Pauline Bodie's work, he says, "It is possible," he said, "to be in love not with someone, but with their eyes. I mean, with how eyes that aren't yours let you see where you are, who you are." And so that's how I feel about authors that I really love, like Clarice Lispector or Borges. All of our favorite authors that we always talk about is because I don't love them personally as an author. I don't know any of them anyway. And I don't know enough about their personal history to be like, oh my God, I'm just in love with who they are as a person. But I love their eyes or their mind. And I love that I can see the world through their perspective. And I was like, oh my goodness, this line is a chef's kiss. That's exactly how I feel about writers and their work. That is the experience that I'm having. But I didn't make the connection until I read that line. And it was like, light bulb. That's why I think he's asexual, because he never really talks about a relationship other than with his sister, and it's obviously a platonic, normal familial relationship. But Elizabeth sort of suspects that he might have been romantic with Pauline, and he's like, no, I love her eyes, I love her work and what it made me feel. So I think he's asexual.
Oh, Joey, I'm going to say I got a different vibe from that because he said that he wanted to love men and women, but he said, I only loved one person like that, and it was Pauline. And though he didn't really say her name, there was that scene where they were talking about James Joyce's story, The Dead. The author takes us there. He, being Daniel, is standing in their backyard. He crawled over a fence. He's in the backyard of Pauline and Clive, her husband, who just got married within the year that this was happening. And she's 20 years younger than him. He makes a note of saying that. He's like, but I love you. He starts singing to her and he was like, this is unhinged. I understand this is not normal behavior, but this is what I'm doing. And then he realizes, oh, there's not even anybody here. I am literally singing into the void. She's never going to hear me. She's never going to know. Thank God she's never going to know because this is so embarrassing. But also like, oh, darn, nobody is going to hear this because this was really his soul pouring out to her. And the other James Joyce association, Joy, which I just thought was so incredibly interesting to me, in the audiobook, particularly, they're literally singing some of these lines. So the playfulness we had when we were reading Ulysses and James Joyce with these beautiful, playful words, puns, saying obscene words. He has this moment with his sister. The sister says, please tell me a story. So he's reciting the story and he's like, I don't know, there's some things. And at the end, she goes, so this is basically the world's story of foreskin. And he's like, oh my God, you can't say that word. That's not a thing. They use the C word to explain a woman's female body part. There's just a lot of provocative language that did not seem obscene. It seemed like a real life exploration of who people were at that moment. And so for me, I was like, James Joyce, I think and I'm going to say this about every story now, there needs to be someone singing. There has to be some song. There has to be lyrics, there has to be poetry, the puns, the language. It was just really beautiful. So I'm going to turn that back over to you, Joey. I felt very strongly that he was like, I didn't think asexual, because for me, that means in my Jennifer terminology, which you'll probably correct me on because I don't really always have the lingo, that asexual means you have no sexual interest. Like that's at like ground zero. And I think he was more of a bisexual person attracted to people and ideas. Maybe that's pansexual. I don't know. It did not feel like sex was a motivating force in his life. It was, as you said, love of beauty, love of ideas, and the way in which another human being, through their presence and the way that they view the world, can change the way you see yourself. Like it's a more accurate mirror in the way that he was interacting with these people. And I'm in love with that idea. Yes, more of that, please.
Yeah, I think he was still romantic and he felt romantic feelings, but I don't think he probably felt sexual feelings. But anyway, I'm sort of contradicting my own case here because I said it didn't matter and then I'm bringing it up too much. Representation does matter. So if I'm right and he was supposed to be asexual, when I'm pretty sure he was, I stick by my assessment there. But in the end, I still believe it does not matter to the story. I think we were maybe supposed to sort of question it based on all of the information that we've been giving, but in the end, it doesn't matter because he is still a wonderful man. And I would love to have him as my neighbor, as I said. But what I want to pivot to is the very opening chapter, because in the very beginning, we get a dream of Daniel's. We do not know that that's what's happening. We're thrown in. There's no hand holding in the beginning of this novel. For me, I was like, what is going on? This is obviously not a fantasy story. It doesn't look like it. So why are we doing this? And then it comes out later that he is in sort of a comatose state that's like extended sleep. I don't know any of the medical part of that, but that's the idea. We're just getting a lot of dreams, and that helps us get to know Daniel because he doesn't actually speak until the very end of the novel. But I was curious as to like, why is Ellie Smith doing that? Why is she introducing us to the entire novel through this almost fever-esque dream? Because it feels like a strange way to start off, but I agree that it's the best way to do it. Your first reading, I think, requires you to reread it because now you can go into it being like, I know what this is. But I think it really shows a lot of Daniel's personality. And I think it's necessary because we have what could look like a Lolita relationship on the surface because we have this older man with a very young girl who has no parental supervision. Her mother just like, I'm going off. I'm going to sow my wild oats over in London, go over to the neighbor's house. Okay. And so I think we needed that to establish that Daniel is going to be a safe mentor or just person with no malevolent intent. He's going to be very caring and very gentle with Elizabeth. And we should trust that this relationship is only ever going to be platonic and that it's a safe environment. We can let our guard down to enjoy this story a lot more. What did you think about the opening?
So, Joey, I'll take you back to the very first time that I read it. And it's talking about grains of sand. He is naked, washed on a shore, and he's like, I need to cover myself. And one of the things he said was, oh, look at my body. It is no longer an old man's body. I can run. And he saw girls on the shore and dancing in a Greek-like style. I was like, wait a minute, are we time traveling back to the time of Odysseus? Is this Odysseus washing up on a shore after he got shipwrecked? That's exactly where it took me. We're talking about timelessness. We're talking about time travel. We're talking about reincarnation. The author makes such a beautiful description of him having little grains of sand in his mouth and in his nose, which was also very Joycey. And oh, I'm just going to stick my finger up my nose and take a look at it. Really? Is that necessary? And I'm like, oh, it's just to show me that you have grains of sand. Okay, I totally get it. You're not being gross. You're being real, down to earth, literally down to earth. This author, I think she's my soul twin. That's all I'm going to say, Joey, about the love of language. She goes on this exploration of time, timelessness, sand, grounded, the sand going through the hourglass, us going through the hourglass, us going through time. It was the stream of consciousness jumping around, talking about puns, doing all of the things that I absolutely love. And she's so aware in her plot lines that she literally says to us, if this was a TV show or if this was in a novel, people would cut this out because this stuff doesn't happen. This is too cliche. This is too obvious. No. And she's like, you know what? It happened. This is my book. And I just love everything about that interweaving. And so, Joey, I'm back on the sexuality thing because why not? It's literature. It's what we do.
We're lit curious anyway.
We're lit curious. Exactly. We're extra literary affairs. So I'm allowed to speak about the sexual aspects of this novel. He said when his body rejuvenated in this dreamlike state, this is what decency feels like. He saw those girls in the distance. He's like, I am naked right now, and that is not a thing that's going to be okay, even though I look as good as I do in this form. I don't remember exactly the words she used, but it felt like this joyful recognition that you want to do the decent thing. You want to know what it feels like to be naked next to another person. So there was just an element of chaste sexuality. I don't even know. He wasn't lusty. He wasn't going to be like pervert. He wasn't going to do anything, but he was just like, oh, yeah, I remember this feeling and it's good. I just love that so much. He said it was the feeling of wanting to be a decent person around another person and not give offense. I was like, A plus plus, because as you said, the mother, Wendy, was like, what does he do? Oh, we talk about pictures. Pictures of what? I don't know, people, this tennis player, what were they doing? And she's like, Mom, you're so stupid. I cannot even believe it's not like that. And she's like, of course it's like that. I know the world. You don't know anything. And I was just like, no, really, he is a saint. He loves your daughter as a human being. Full stop. That's it. It's just one human to another. Did not matter. And I was like, oh, thank you so much for not making this a creepy old man victimization story.
Yeah, for real. I think that exact thing that you're talking about when he is in this dream and he sees those girls and he covers up because he wants to do the decent thing. I think that is when you're like, okay. When you learn later that they will have a friendship, you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure I have a good read on this guy and he's not going to be a creepy old man. He is going to be a decent old man. But I think it's interesting that we start Daniel's narrative with a dream and it goes all over the place. And then the first time we meet Elizabeth, she's at the post office trying to get a passport, and it's very comical. It's almost Kafka-esque because you're like, why is there so much arbitrary bureaucracy happening here? Like your eyes aren't the right size, your hair is in your face, but it's on your head, so you can't get it away from your face because it's permanently there unless you don't have any hair. And it's just like this very funny thing that's happening. You get these introductions to these characters, and it really gives us a good glimpse into what their personalities are. Like Daniel is, I don't want to say like a hippie because that's not really what he was, but he was sort of like go with the flow. He really enjoyed the exploration of art and imagination and in creativity. And Elizabeth did as well, obviously, but I think she was a little bit more logical about the way she wanted to approach things and more meticulous and maybe wanted to understand the function of art and the technical side of art, the techniques of art. And I think that's why she becomes an art history professor, because she's trying to teach all of these things. Whereas if Daniel was a professor, he'd probably teach art, like how to make art and express yourself. And so I really liked that juxtaposition that we get immediately where we're like, oh my God, what are we doing out here in this dreamland? Or is he dead? Is this a ghost? And then we're grounded back into reality. Elizabeth is trying to get a passport, and it's very funny.
It is very funny, but it was so frustrating, Joey. And I think the
Yeah,
word that came up for me when you were describing Daniel, I was like, he's bohemian. He is
that's it. That's a good
so
one.
open to experience, open to the world. There is zero judgment. I think his only judgment is against people who don't read, which I have to say that I also have that same bias. Readers have extra brownie points in the world of Jennifer and possibly Joey. If you're a reader, you're probably for us. He taught her and gave her the space to be curious and to ask him questions. She asks him a very direct question very early in their relationship. She says, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. It has nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my mom. But if a lady goes away and she has a kid that she's responsible for and she gets dressed up and she stays out overnight and she meets a guy in a hotel, but she says she was at Tesco, is that morally wrong? Like, what's she doing? And instead of lecturing, Daniel says, are you asking me, have I ever done that? Are you asking me, is this a moral failing? Are you asking me if it's wrong because you're a child? Is it wrong to lie? Is it wrong to have sex with strangers? He really helped her explore, what are you doing? And I loved the way the author handled it. She's like, yes, all of those things. I want to know and explore every single one of those things. That was just such a beautiful way to model child adult relationships. Don't shade kids from the truth. Allow children to have an opportunity to tactfully, to their development level, get the facts. And that was so incredibly refreshing. I'm completely touched by that. My 2 things turned into 40 things because that's what this book is about. But I wanted to go back to something that you often mention is this was a nonlinear timeline, right? We are weaving in and out of different people's stories, different people's timelines, actual history, imagined events, and I thought that was very effectively done. If could only talk about one more thing in this entire story, the life lessons that we learned from Daniel Gluck. And one of the things that he passed on to her, Joey, that stuck with me, always be reading something. She was being a snarky little bitchy 12-year-old. She walks up to him in a bad mood. He's like, "So, what are you reading?" She's like, "Does it look like I'm reading anything? Do you see a book?" And he was like, "Even if you're not reading something, you're always reading something in your mind." And she's like, "What?" And then she's like, "I get it." And so we see her reading throughout the novel and making commentary. She makes comments about the things that she's reading. And I love the fact that she puts in James Joyce, she puts in Shakespeare, she refers to Tempest. She has a spot when a woman is on trial saying, "I lied about lying." They're raking the lady over the coals. And they're like, "Well, why didn't you do it the right way?" And she's like, "Who would I complain to about this experience?" That's measure for measure. That's a line that is one of Shakespeare's very famous lines. "To whom shall I complain? Nobody, because nobody cares and nobody's going to fix this for you." So again, totally in love with Allie Smith because all of these references, when you know, you know. And as you said, the more you listen to it, the more you're like, oh yeah, a nod to that, a nod to that. So yeah, be a good person, read a book all the time, everywhere.
Yeah. I like when people say they don't like to read because I'm like, I bet I could figure out something that you would like to read. It's usually a short story. I'm like, oh, this is only 8 pages. And I recently said that to somebody, like, oh, there's this really great story by Ling Ma. Okay. We love her. And it's only 8 pages. And he was like, that doesn't sound like a story. I'm like, stick with me, kid. I'll teach you things you never saw. I know we're getting close to the end here, but I feel like we should talk about the title. Before I started this story, I had no idea what it was going to be about. Obviously, the synopsis is not very telling. I knew it was a part of the seasonal quartet. So I just assumed it would all happen during the autumn. Obviously, that doesn't happen. That's not when it takes place. Parts of the story are bound to be in autumn. It takes place over such a huge, expansive time, really. Maybe not huge, but we go back to World War II for a minute, and then we're all the way back in like 2016, I think is probably the latest. So as I was reading, I was trying to think like, well, what is this? Because as I was reading, I was like, Allie Smith is not going to be so obvious and name her story after the time of year that she put it in, because that's a little too on the nose. And she is obviously a better storyteller than that now that I know that. So my theory is that this is the autumn of Daniel's life. And there is this moment that I want to read really quickly that supports what it was. But I think the point of this story is that Daniel he's 101. He does not have much time left. I mean, he got pretty far, okay, with his life, but 101, that's a long time. So I think that is the idea, is like the changing of the season where things are dying out and you're going into the winter of your life, which would be your death. So that is what I was thinking. But there was something that was so beautiful that, of course, was written in this story, and then it's between Elizabeth and Daniel. So I'm just going to read really quick. So it says, Elizabeth was 14. She and Daniel were walking where the canal met the countryside, where the path peels away and goes up through to the woods on the curve of the hill. It was suddenly quite freezing, though it was only quite early in autumn. The rain was coming. She could see it when they got to the top of the hill. It was moving across a landscape like someone was shading in the sky with a pencil. Daniel was out of breath. He didn't usually get out of breath. I don't like it when the summer goes and the autumn comes, she said. Daniel took her by the shoulders and turned her round. He didn't say anything, but all across the landscape down behind them, it was still sunlit blue and green. She looked at him, showing her how the summer was still there. Nobody spoke like Daniel. Nobody didn't speak like Daniel. So, first of all, classic Daniel. And I love that not only is he like, look around you, like it is still there. It is not the autumn of your life. The summer is still here. These are your golden years, sort of thing. But what I really love about this scene, and I'm like, very few authors, in my opinion, could do this, is that Daniel never actually says anything here. We get what he is talking about, but we are so well acquainted with Daniel at this point in the story. We can just imagine what he said. We know it's going to be inspiring, and we know it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to change our lives, and we don't even need to hear it. And we're still convinced that he is correct. Beautiful.
I love that you said that because she says she has these memories of what she thought Daniel had said at certain times in her life. And she's like, None of this happened. I made all of this up. And then she goes, the reason I know this is because now we're looking into Daniel's memory banks. He is then narrating what he actually said to her. I thought that was just beautiful. As you said, when you know somebody and your experience with them, you can anticipate with a gesture, with just, I'm like, Joey. And you're like, oh, I know exactly what she's trying to get me to do right at this moment, right? You just
Yeah.
have this feeling and being on the inside of that, and to feel it was really great. But Joy, what I thought this was referring to, we are also brought by the author to a version of seeing trees stripped of all their leaves. There's a lot about greenness, sprouts, leaves. Leaves as ideas, leaves as social cover, leaves as this idealized version of Eden. All of that stuff was in the background. And there was one particular passage, and I'm sorry I don't have it noted, but read it yourself, readers, and you will find it, about the starkness of seeing the outline, the bare essence of the trees once fall has come and all the leaves are gone. Because he has a conversation with her in that game that they were playing, Bagatelle. And it's like, okay, here's the story. Like, my character is going to be dressed up as a tree. And she's like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, why? That's just dumb. And he's like, really? Let's go through the things. And as he was going through it, we learn so much about trees and their properties, just all of this beautiful imagery that was woven in. But Joey, what really hit me, and it only hit me when you asked me, is why is this called autumn? Yes, I agree. It's the autumn of his life. It's not winter. He's not dead. He's not restarting. He is 101. He, Daniel Gluck, had created a song that was called Summer Brother, Autumn Sister. Oh, is this also a nod to his sister who died during the Holocaust? He said she was either 20 or 21 when she died. There was so much beauty and joy and hope in this story, but it was also crushing. I think we both can say we are both in love with Daniel and we wish he was real, sitting here on the third spot of the podcast. We wish this guy were actually present in our lives, because he's just a font of knowledge and inspiration and creativity and just noticing the details of the world that makes our experience richer. We love him. And he was like, you know who was really smart? You know who was really great? My sister. She was so much smarter, so much more everything than me. And her life was snuffed out as a result of the World War II, Holocaust, genocide, call it what you want. But his sister's life was cut tragically short. It was not beating us over the head. It was not heavy handed, but the author puts in, you know how it starts? It starts with people coming after certain groups of people, and it never stops with just those people. The author showed us this Holocaust language, the things that were happening, the transportation, the deportation, the concentration camps, all of that stuff is in the background. And then she shows us Brexit, where people are spray painting, go home. We don't want you here. You guys see what's going on here? Because I'm just going to hit you over the head. This was published 2016, 2017, somewhere in that time frame. It was perfectly relevant to what's happening in the United States right now. She talks about polarization. She talks about the inability to have dialogue, the inability to see your neighbor as anything other than a threat. And I love that she said, half the country is pissed off, half the country is elated. Half the country thinks they got cheated, half think they won. And she just went through, literally, it was like a page and a half, Joe. You remember that? One says this, one says that, one says this, one says that. Everyone is disappointed. That's the one thing that they can agree about. They didn't get everything they wanted on either side. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a premonition of what the United States was going to have happen 10 years later. We're in the soup and thick of it now. And I hope we, like the people in the novel, can find a way to bridge the gap and have a dialogue. That was one of the things she said a lot. Oh, look what we're doing. This is called a dialogue. Dialogues are how we're going to get through.
There's just so much of this story that we didn't even talk about. But yes, it's very unfortunate that it is still so relevant that to have this discussion about this demagoguery of immigrants in the UK. And obviously, like you just said, if you're from the United States or you know anything about the United States right now, it's not looking good over here. It's a very timeless story because all these things will always be relevant, even if they're not currently happening, to know about history and what people are going through and how people are reacting, because there is exactly what you said. There's that list of everybody's reaction that she could think of. I mean, you can't put everyone, but it's like 2 pages or 3 pages long. Here's how everyone reacted to the Brexit vote. And it's a mixed bag because everyone feels differently. It was such a beautiful thing to put in there because everyone is motivated by something different. We could go on and on. I highly encourage everyone to read this. It is really short. It's only 260 pages, but it goes like that. I could have finished it in one sitting. So I highly recommend that everyone read this because it's such a beautiful book. And even though we talked about so many things, there's so many more things that we didn't even get to touch on. There are some stories that we were just like, just read it, because no matter how long we sit here and talk about it, we'll never be able to give you the same feeling that the story itself will. And I think that's true for this one.
So, Joey, I just want to rattle off a few things that we didn't get to talk about. We want to talk about representation. We wanted to talk about gender equality. We wanted to talk about what's the role of education and where do you get it. He tells the girl she doesn't need to go to college until she knows what she wants to study. And he's like, you want to go to a collage? And she's like, that's the wrong word. Don't be dumb. And he's like, no, a collage means pulling pieces of the world together to create something new. Well, yeah, I do want to go to college to make a collage. That was a good thing.
And then she likes Pauline Body's work.
She
Bodhi.
lectures her mom that, like, a picture of a picture is not you, it's a picture of you, which is a representation of representation. Then she sues to get the royalty rights for music that was being pirated and not used correctly. So there's money, there's power, there's industrialization. Everything that you might be curious about is in this book. Joey, thank you so much for accidentally stumbling upon this amazing piece of work in a bookshop and bringing that to our attention. I'm so looking forward to reading the next installment, Winter, which we will do in the upcoming months. And maybe, Joey, we will make a pact, just you and I, like our own secret pact, that in 5 years, we'll read this again and see, where are we? How do we feel about it? Did it hold up? Are we still in the soup? Did we get past it? I'm just really curious what will happen in another 5 years.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a story that I'm going to keep rereading because it's such a pleasure to read. I think it's a good book to revisit years after you've read it and see what sticks with you and what becomes more relevant to you. Good idea.
Great, Joey. I will end it with this. It was a pleasure read. There's a lot of heavy topics in there. There's a lot of beauty. And I did cry. There were definitely some tears shed for me in this story, but it was just pure pleasure. Like, why would we say, thanks for discussing the story. Now I want to hang up so I can listen to the story again because I need another dose. So what do we always say? Read the book. When you know, you know.
Yeah, you should read this one. Next week, to start off December, we're going to be reading The Bear by William Faulkner.
We certainly are. So that will be a very different story than the story we discussed today. But I'm really excited to dig into some Faulkner with you, Joey. I think it will be a good time.
Yeah, because we've only read A Rose for Emily, and that was not Faulkner's signature style. It's a very straightforward story. Although it's a good one. You should read that one too.
All right. See you next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.